Alright, so today we've got a very special review. So if you've been following this channel lately, you've probably realized that I reviewed the Samsung Odyssey G5 and I've had a very good experience with it. So right after I made that video, I was just thinking, how would a G7 feel like? Because I've heard a lot of great things about it and I just wanted to experience myself. So, what would a G7 feel like? So guess what? In this video, we'll be looking at the G7. Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Rohan Bijou, and in this video, we'll be looking at the Samsung Odyssey G7. So in this video, I'm gonna do an unboxing. I'm gonna show you the setup process because there's an extra step than a traditional monitor when setting up. So if you do have the monitor already, you can just follow up with this video and I'll show you the setup process. Then I'm gonna give you the specs and I'm gonna give you some opinions on those specs. And then finally, I'm gonna give my final thoughts and my experience with this monitor. So I know that's a lot to cover. So before this video, subscribe to this channel if you wanna watch more future content like this. Like this video if you do find this helpful, and comment any questions, concerns, or comments on the Samsung Odyssey G7. Alright, onwards to the video. Alright, first up, unboxing. So Samsung has an amazing box for the G7 and it's actually very similar to the G5 box I reviewed a couple of videos ago. Let's pop the box open and take a look inside. Inside you will find some directions printed on the box, but we can ignore that for now and look at the items inside. First off, this is the neck of the monitor and it's insanely big and heavy. In almost all the monitors I reviewed, the neck was usually pretty small. But the one for the G7 is very hefty, and there is a reason for that heft because it itself has some quirks and features that are pretty interesting. Next, let's pull out the base of the monitor, and as you can see, it's V-shaped, and this means that you can place a lot of items when placing this monitor stand down so that you can place any items on the table, so you'll have a lot of room. Then you will also find a metal ring, and this is actually a 100 by 100 VESA adapter for when you're using a VESA mount for a third-party stand. So if you aren't happy with the Samsung neck provided, you can buy a wall mount where you can have an arm and connect it to the monitor, or you can just buy a regular third-party stand and use a VESA mount to connect it to the monitor. Next, we can pull this plastic ring, which I'll explain its use case later on. And just a hint, this is gonna be used for the LED light ring for the back of the monitor. And then you get the paperwork and all the wires like the PC cable, a DisplayPort 1.4 cable, and a very thick power brick and a wire to connect it to the monitor. The power brick is very large. For the G5, it was actually a very small square, but this is like a huge hefty rectangle. So if you care a lot about wire management, I don't know how you're gonna hide that. It's pretty noticeable. And then you'll also find a plastic rectangular cover that is used to cover up the ports. So if you do have the monitor facing a crowd, or like if you're in a workspace and people walk in front of you and they can see the back of the monitor, you can use this plastic cover to cover up the ports and have a nice sleek design on the back of the monitor. Lastly, let's pull out the monitor from the box and place it down on the table. First impressions, it has a very mean curve and you'll notice it immediately. So that is a very big feature for both the G5 and G7, the curve, and it's actually the 1000R curve, which makes your experience with the monitor very immersive when playing games. And I'll explain more about that 1000R curve in the specs. And overall, this monitor has a very cool design and has the same structure as the G5, but obviously for the price of $800, they added some more quirks. In the back, you'll notice this white circle, and this is the RGB light, which can display any color you want on the back. There are also exhaust fan looking things, which was also found on the G5, but in the G7, it also emits light. And on the back, there is a poppable headphone stand, which is a really nice feature that Samsung added. And also the monitor has some nice ridges on the back, and this looks really cool when certain light reflects off of it. And even though it's mostly made out of plastic, it feels really strong. Alright, so now let's talk more about the setup of the monitor. So as I said in the beginning, this monitor has some extra steps when setting up the monitor than a traditional monitor. So first, let's screw the V-shaped base to the neck of the monitor just by connecting the pieces and screwing the built-in screw. And after you're done with that, you can start connecting the monitor to the neck. And there will already be screws pre-installed on the neck. That's just covered by tape. You just remove that tape and the screws should already be in the holes. So then you just place the neck on top of the monitor, screw them in, and until they feel really in place. After you're done with that, you will need to take the plastic circle you found before and split them apart. They should split pretty easily. Then you put those parts together where the neck and the monitor meet, and then you join them together. Then you'll finally have to twist the plastic rings until you feel it attach to the monitor, and then you can set the monitor upright, and then plug the monitor to power, and then connect your PC console, and you're all set to play a game. So after we got the setup out of the way, let's move on to the specs. So as I've mentioned this before, this monitor costs $800 for the 32-inch version and $700 for the 27-inch version. First, let's talk about the display. The display is a 32-inch QLED screen that is a VA panel with a 4K resolution, and the screen itself has a 1000R curve. It is supposed to match the curvature of the human eye so that you can experience full immersion, and I just gotta say, it works. It is not a gimmick, and it 100% works and elevates the gaming experience. The display has a max 240Hz refresh rate, which is actually insane, and it's an insane combination with the 4K display, because there have been many monitors that have a 240Hz refresh rate, but they've mostly had a 1080p display. So it's great that they could combine both the 240Hz fast refresh rate with an amazing 4K display. The monitor also has a millisecond response time, and the monitor has a 100% sRGB score. The aspect ratio is 16:9, and the monitor has an almost bezel-less design, and the peak brightness is 600 nits, which is pretty bright, and it's really great compared to the G5. The static contrast ratio is 2500 to 1, and it has HDR600 certification, which is pretty impressive. The G7 also has local dimming, which means that there are small LEDs scattered across the rear of the monitor rather than around the edges. This monitor also has AMD FreeSync technology for buttery smooth gaming, and it is also G-Sync compatible for NVIDIA card holders. Alright, so now let's talk more about the physical specs of the monitor. The monitor comes in a matte black finish, but it isn't as dark as you expect it to be. It's more like a space gray colorway. So as you've seen in the unboxing, there is a V-shaped base, which is 13 inches long, and it means you can place any item around it, but it does take up a lot of space, so you'll need a pretty wide table. Also, because of the curvature of the monitor, you'll need a very deep table as well, because the monitor is very thick, and the addition to the neck, which is also extremely large, means that you will need a very deep table. There is also some decent mobility for this monitor. It can tilt, swivel, pivot, and even be put in portrait mode, which I don't really advise. It's not a really good idea, but if you really want to, you can go ahead, you do you, and you can even adjust the height of the monitor, which is pretty amazing. And this sort of mobility wasn't available in the G5. And now let's move on to ports. There's one HDMI port, 2 display ports, 2 USB ports, a headphone port, and a power port. There is a joystick in the middle of the monitor to access the menu, source, and the menu is very intuitive. It has an amazing launch rather than just like popping up on the screen. It has sort of like this cool, like a little slight animation, and the design of the menu sort of looks like a car display. It looks really nice, really gamer-like. So you can change all the settings right here, like color profile, response time. You can even change the color of the lights in the back and the front from the menu itself. And overall, the menu is very easy to navigate, which is a huge plus for me. If you look at the rear of the monitor, you'll notice some very cool features. For one, as I mentioned before, there is a headphone holder, which you can pop out, and this is a very nice touch by Samsung. There's also a hidden wire management section inside of the neck of the monitor, which you can access by removing the back panel of the neck. This helps with managing your desk area, keeping clear of wires. But as I said before, I don't know how you're gonna hide that huge power brick. You'll have to find a way. And then, as mentioned before, there are lights on the monitor, 1 on the back, 2 on the front. And this just makes the monitor feel really cool. And obviously this is the obvious difference between the G5 and G7. The G5 did not have this lights, and the G7 has this light, and it looks really cool. But the lights does not reflect the colors based on the game you're playing. Instead, you'll have to go to the menu and change it manually. And I believe in the very new G7, they're planning to have this sort of technology where it sees the color on the screen and display that sort of color on the back, so that creates like an ambient light when you place this monitor against the wall and you're playing a game, and that sort of color bleeds out to the back. It sort of creates this nice environment. It makes it more immersive. Even with the 1000R curve, it creates an even more immersive experience. But that's only for the very latest G7. And I hope I covered all the important specs. So now let's move on to my final thoughts in my experience with this monitor. So I've been using this monitor with my Xbox One X, and I just gotta say, just a disclaimer, I was only able to use it at 120 Hertz because the Xbox One X caps at 120 Hertz. So I wasn't able to test the full extent of the 240 Hertz of this monitor. But this is gonna be, all these thoughts are based off my experience with that 120 Hertz with the Xbox. So please take this opinion with a grain of salt because it can depend and vary based on different people and different use cases. So personally, I feel like this monitor performance-wise is kind of better than the G5. The image feels a bit more crisper, the games run smoothly, and every look is nice and contrasty. But obviously I shouldn't be comparing the G5 to G7 because they both are targeted at certain individuals. The G5 is for more budget-friendly people, but the G7 is more like a hardcore monitor for hardcore gamers with better specs and some extra quirks. But one thing I really enjoyed in both monitors is the 1000R curve, and the G7 only elevates that experience. I feel like I'm immersed in a game. But if you are a hardcore gamer who plays in esports tournaments or play competitively, then this monitor is not for you, and I would recommend a flat screen monitor with some better specs for some more competitive gaming. I played games like Batman Arkham Knight, Battlefront 2, I did the tutorial of the Warzone, I played Forza Horizon 4 and many other games like that. I really love Arkham Knight on this monitor because it's such a good game to test the contrast ratio, and the image was perfectly contrasty and the darks and whites were very clear. But if you are going to use this monitor for work or for school, it's actually pretty good. But I don't think there's a reason to get a monitor with 240 Hertz. I don't know a use case for that for a school or work environment. But if you do use it, then it's actually a really good monitor for it. So in the end, I feel like this is the most expensive and probably the best monitor I reviewed on this channel. So when you think about the specs, you sort of design the aesthetic, the lighting, the refresh rate, the image quality, the buttery smooth gaming. I think this is probably the best monitor reviewed on this channel. The immersion itself with the 1000R curve really elevates, it hits all the checkpoints I want in a monitor. The immersiveness, the really smooth gameplay. Personally, I think this is the best monitor I've reviewed on the channel and the best monitor I've come so far. Previously, it was the MSI Optix G271, but I think this may just take the spot on the top. So that's it for the video. I hope you found this helpful. Please like this video if you found this helpful. Subscribe to this channel if you want to watch more future content like this. Comment any questions, concerns, or even comments about the G7. I'll try my best to answer them. So thank you guys for watching. Catch you in the next one. Peace.